When I first moved into Metropolitan Towers, I was immediately taken in by the sleek glass facade and pristine lobby. The building soared 20 floors high, each floor boasting modern hallways, carefully maintained carpets, and minimalistic decor. It looked like the kind of place where you could live comfortably with minimal fuss. For me, it was a dream come true, a chance to live in the heart of the city, close to work, with amenities like a small fitness center, a communal lounge, and a rooftop terrace that afforded sweeping views of the skyline. It seemed perfect, too perfect, in fact. I'd heard a few whispers about an overzealous homeowners association, but I'd experienced HOAs before and thought, how bad could it be? Little did I know that Metropolitan Towers was essentially under the rule of one woman, Margaret Bennington, known among longtime residents as Karen. I would soon discover that she reveled in controlling everything, from the color of potted plants in the hallway to how many guests you could invite to the rooftop at once. And though I didn't understand at the time, I was about to witness her strangest venture yet. I had barely been in my unit a week when I encountered Margaret, Karen, in person. I was checking my mail in the shiny, mirrored mailroom when I heard the sharp click of heels. Turning around, I saw a woman in her 50s wearing a crisp navy blazer and pencil skirt. Her short hair was meticulously styled, and her eyes darted about like she was scanning for infractions. "You must be new," she said curtly, her tone halfway between a greeting and an accusation. I nodded. "Yes, I'm Sam. Unit 9C. Nice to meet you." "I'm Margaret Bennington," she replied, handing me a business card that read Metropolitan Towers HOA President. Beneath her breath, she added, "Folks around here just call me Ms. Bennington or Ms. B. Some use that ridiculous term. Karen, please don't encourage them." Her forced smile made it clear that she was well aware of her unflattering nickname. I tucked the card into my pocket and tried to stay polite. "Thanks for the introduction, Ms. Bennington. I appreciate the official rules packet you left in my mailbox." She nodded stiffly. "Yes, well, be sure to read it thoroughly. We take community standards very seriously. And do let me know if you have any questions regarding what's acceptable here at the Towers." Her gaze drifted to the small potted succulent I was carrying, an unobtrusive bit of decor for my kitchen counter. "That had better stay in your unit," she remarked blandly. "We do not allow free placement of personal plants in communal hallways without written permission." Before I could answer, she spun on her heel and strode away. A cold shiver ran through me. So that was Karen. Over the next few days, I settled in, unpacking boxes and arranging my new condo. My neighbor across the hall, Martha, an affable retiree, stopped by with a plate of cookies. In hushed tones, she asked about my first impressions of Ms. Bennington. I chuckled. "She seems intense." Martha shook her head. "I've lived here for 5 years. She was just a regular board member at first, but then she ran for HOA president and won. Ever since, it's been rule after rule. She can be quite cunning. Please be careful." We chatted about some of the standard annoyances, like how Ms. Bennington once demanded Martha remove a family photo from the hallway table next to her door, citing visual clutter. Another resident, Greg, got fined for leaving a bicycle in the common corridor for more than 5 minutes. Yet, as oppressive as these measures were, I had no clue they were only the tip of the iceberg. One Monday morning, as I passed through the lobby on my way to work, I noticed something new. Karen had posted a large, official-looking sign on a folding easel. "Coming soon, Margaret's Refreshments. By popular demand, we will soon offer fresh lemonade and other beverages in our main lobby. We aim to foster community spirit and convenient refreshment access. Stay tuned for details on pricing and operating hours." I blinked in surprise. A refreshment stand in the lobby? The building already had vending machines in the basement near the laundry room. Was this an HOA sponsor event? Or was it something Karen was doing on her own? The sign was short on specifics, but Margaret's Refreshments suggested it might be her personal enterprise. I shrugged, figuring I'd find out soon enough. Many HOAs do silly things for extra funds, like bake sales or small craft fairs. But if that's what it was, it seemed oddly unorthodox. Part of me was curious, part of me was wary. Because if Karen was involved, it wouldn't be straightforward. By Thursday morning, the stand was in place. I say stand because it was more of a commandeered corner of the lobby, complete with a tall bar table, a lemon-themed tablecloth, stacks of plastic cups, and a bright yellow sign reading Margaret's Lemonade. Next to it, I spotted an ice cooler, a metal cash box, and a makeshift list of prices. Lemonade, small, $4. Lemonade, large, $6. Fruit punch, $5. Coffee, hot or iced, $5. The cost struck me as steep, but this was a downtown building. Maybe Ms. Bennington thought she could charge a premium. A handful of neighbors wandered by, eyeing the setup in confusion. I overheard one young couple mutter, $4 for a small lemonade? Seriously? Just then, Karen appeared, wearing a bright yellow apron over her blazer. She greeted passers-by and pointed to the sign. "Come, enjoy a refreshing drink before heading out," she proclaimed with forced cheer. A few people asked if the HOA had sanctioned this stand, to which Karen answered vaguely, Yes, we have approvals," waving them off with a smile that dared them to challenge her. Though she tried to exude confidence, something about her manner suggested a lack of real authorization behind the scenes. Over the next week, Karen's lemonade stand became a fixture in the lobby, open every weekday morning from about 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., and again in the late afternoon from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. She sometimes posted a sign that read, "Closed for lunch," but for the most part, she was there in her apron, ready to sell. People found it convenient when they didn't mind the hefty price. A handful of rush professionals forked over $4 to $6 for a quick drink on their way out. A few older residents, though, refused to pay. They'd wave away Karen with a polite, "No thanks," sometimes rolling their eyes. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating. Did Karen have the board's official permission to do this? Was she pocketing all the revenue herself? Or was this money going to the HOA? Did she even have a license to operate a business on the premises? Neighbors corner me in the elevator, venting frustration. "She's commandeered our lobby," one woman exclaimed. "Feels like she's hawking overpriced lemonade for personal profit." Another man grumbled. I asked if the money went toward building improvements, but she dodged the question. I started to see a pattern. Karen clearly wanted extra income, exploiting the condo's foot traffic. The question, was it legal? The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in the community lounge. Having grown more curious and more annoyed by the daily lemonade hustle, I decided to attend for the first time. The lounge on the second floor was a bland room with folding chairs and a flimsy lectern. Residents trickled in, but Karen was notably absent at the start. Two other board members, Ms. Green and Mr. Diaz, began going through the standard agenda, budget updates, discussion of painting the stairwells, and so forth. About half an hour in, Karen finally swept into the room, still wearing her bright yellow apron. She took a seat at the center of the front table, ignoring curious stares. When the floor opened for questions, a neighbor named Samantha raised her hand. "Ms. Bennington, could you please clarify the purpose of the lemonade stand in our lobby? Who approved it? And where is the revenue going?" Karen cleared her throat. "Yes, well, I've initiated a small beverage service for the convenience of residents. As president, I feel it's beneficial to offer refreshments on site. The board, well, we're in the process of formalizing the arrangement. But rest assured, we have all the necessary coverage under the building's insurance." Ms. Green frowned. "Actually, Ms. Bennington, we never discussed anything about a beverage service in the last board meeting, nor was it on tonight's agenda." Karen brushed her off. "It's a pilot program. No formal vote required for a small-scale initiative. Once we see how it fares, we'll discuss next steps." A flurry of murmurs swept the room. Ms. Green tried to object, but Karen moved on quickly, changing the topic to hallway carpet cleaning. It was clear she didn't want to answer real questions about permits, finances, or how this stand had been authorized. Even as a newcomer, I felt the tension and realized Karen was pushing personal projects under the guise of HOA improvements. After the meeting ended, I found myself in a corner of the lounge with Ms. Green and Mr. Diaz, the two board members who seemed most uneasy about Karen's stand. Mr. Diaz sighed. "I had no idea she was planning this. She just showed up one morning with that table and started selling drinks. If we call her out, though she'll accuse us of not supporting community building efforts. Ms. Green rolled her eyes. She claims it's a pilot program to see if the building can run a profitable cafe in the future. But if that's the case, it should have gone through the proper channels. We can't simply let anyone run a personal business in the lobby, especially if she doesn't have a permit or board approval. I nodded. You think she's doing it just for personal gain? They exchanged glances. Likely. She's never once mentioned funneling the money into HOA projects, Ms. Green said. We parted ways, all of us unsettled. It seemed that Karen's so-called stand might be a bigger issue than we realized. And if she was ignoring the rules, we needed a way to hold her accountable. Later that week, I had lunch with a friend named Carrie, an acquaintance from my old neighborhood who happened to work in City Hall's small business licensing department. Over salads, I recounted the fiasco at Metropolitan Towers, the sudden appearance of a private lemonade stand in our lobby, the suspiciously high prices, the hush-hush finances. Carrie raised an eyebrow. Does she have a vendor's license? A health permit? Operating a beverage stand typically requires certain approvals, especially if she's selling to the public in a shared space. I shrugged. No idea. She claims it's a pilot HOA thing, but basically, it's just her hawking drinks. That's what I suspect, anyway. Neighbors are complaining, but she's the HOA president, so she's stonewalling everyone. Carrie sipped her iced tea thoughtfully. You know, if she's not going through the proper channels, that could be a violation. Maybe you want someone to look into it. Or if you like, I could swing by casually, check it out, and see if any rules are being broken. A small spark of mischief lit up my eyes. Would you mind? Maybe just drop in, pose as a resident or something, see if she's following city guidelines. If she's not, perhaps you can nudge her to close it down. Carrie grinned. Sure, let me see what I can do. The city does have a department for unlicensed street vendors and pop-up stands, though usually we deal with those outdoors, not in a private condo. Still, if it's open to the public, the same regulations might apply. We agreed to plan a friendly drop-by soon. Part of me felt giddy about the idea of exposing Karen's scheme, though I also felt a pang of nerves about how she might react. Meanwhile, Karen's stand continued unabated. In fact, by the following Monday, she had raised prices yet again, now charging $5 for a small lemonade and $7 for a large. She added a note reading organic lemons, sourced locally, in big letters. But nobody knew if that was true or just a ploy to justify the cost. People grumbled. Some refused to buy. Others, in a morning rush, still ponied up the cash out of convenience. Karen's approach was pushy. She'd greet folks with a bright smile and a wave toward her table, as if she were doing us all a grand favor. If you declined, she'd stare pointedly, as though you were a fool to pass up her luxury lemonade. Each day, the lobby smelled faintly of citrus and artificial sweetener. Stacks of plastic cups filled a storage bin behind the table. The building's cleaning staff seemed annoyed at the extra trash and occasional sticky spills near the trash cans. Residents muttered about the lack of official signage explaining where the money was going. Still, no one confronted Karen directly. She was known for her combative responses. Martha told me she'd once tried to question the sanitation of the stand, only to be ridiculed in front of other neighbors. Karen apparently called her a troublemaker and threatened to write her up for creating tension in a common area. The hostility was real, and folks were wary. One afternoon, after coming home from work, I found a petite woman near the elevator, eyeing the lemonade stand with a frown. She wore a city employee badge and held a small notepad. My pulse quickened. It had to be Carrie, right? Sure enough, she glanced up, saw me, and gave a subtle nod. I pretended not to know her. She approached Karen's table, where Karen was busy pouring a fresh pitcher of lemonade. Hello, Carrie said politely. Interesting stand you have here. Are you selling these drinks to all building residents? Karen brightened at the prospect of a new customer. Yes, indeed. We're a fully operational refreshment station, Margaret's Lemonade. We serve top-quality products. Can I interest you in a sample? How much is a small? $5, Karen chirped. You won't find better lemonade in the city, I promise. Carrie took out her wallet. I'm new to the area, actually, just exploring. She handed over a $5 bill, and Karen placed a small cup of lemonade in her hand. Carrie sipped it, feigning mild interest. It's tangy. So you run this place as part of the HOA? Karen gave that stiff grin. Yes, I'm the HOA president. We decided to offer residents an easy way to quench their thirst without leaving the building. It's all above board, of course. Carrie nodded as if impressed, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She jotted something in her notepad. I see. Do you need any special permit for a business in a residential lobby? Or? Karen waved a dismissive hand. No need. This is private property, and I'm the HOA president. We have everything under control. Carrie just smiled. That's good to hear. She thanked Karen, walked away, then gave me a quick wink as she entered the elevator. My heart thundered with excitement. The stage was set. Now I had to wait for Carrie's official next steps. Over the next several days, I kept in touch with Carrie via text. She told me that from her vantage point, Karen was definitely operating a commercial venture without clear city licensing. In many municipalities, even a pop-up stand on private property might require a sales tax permit, health inspection, if selling prepared beverages, and possibly a vending license, especially if it's accessible to the public. She's basically running a business out of a condo building's lobby, Carrie wrote. It's not a private fundraiser. She's charging set prices, presumably taking profit. She has no sign of a posted permit. That's enough for an inquiry, at least. Sure enough, Carrie said she'd relay the info to her department's compliance unit. They'd likely schedule a surprise check, or at least send a warning letter. My stomach fluttered at the thought. Karen wouldn't take kindly to being ambushed. But then again, she had no right to break the rules while simultaneously forcing them on everyone else. I confided in Martha, who nodded gravely. She deserves what's coming, Martha said. I just hope she doesn't retaliate too harshly against you. I shrugged. I can handle it. She can't keep lording over us with these double standards. In the meantime, the Lemonade Lounge, as some started calling it sarcastically, thrived. Karen added a small glass jar labeled tips to her table, and she even began offering gourmet add-ons like a slice of strawberry or a sprig of mint for an extra $1. It was all so brazen, it bordered on comedy. But behind the scenes, tension simmered. One bright Wednesday morning, I left my condo early, hoping to observe any potential confrontation. Sure enough, as I crossed the lobby toward the front entrance, I saw 2 uniformed city inspectors accompanied by Carrie. Karen was behind her table, busily wiping a spill. The first inspector, a stocky man in a neatly pressed shirt, approached Karen. Ma'am, good morning. I'm with the city's Licensing and Consumer Protection Division. We've received information about an unpermitted beverage stand operating here. May we speak with you? Karen's face drained of color, then re-hardened in a defensive expression. Excuse me? This is private property. I have no idea what you're referring to. The inspector held up a clipboard. We're responding to a report that you're selling drinks to residents for a set price, effectively running a commercial operation. Under city ordinances, such ventures typically require a vendor's license, food handling permit, and possibly additional permissions if in a multi-unit dwelling. Do you have any documentation to confirm compliance? Karen's gaze flicked around, searching for support. I'm the HOA president. We're not exactly a commercial business. This is a courtesy stand, a pilot program for building improvements. The second inspector, a woman with a calm but firm demeanor, chimed in. Do you collect payment from people who are not members of your household? Are these beverages prepared or stored on-site, using shared building resources like water or electricity? Karen hesitated. Yes, we do collect a small fee, but it's just to cover costs. I assure you, it's all within the building's rights. The inspector shook her head politely. Without the relevant permits, this is considered an unlicensed beverage operation. We need to see your business license, your health inspection certification, and any other relevant documents. If you can't provide them, we must order you to cease operations until you comply with local regulations. At this point, neighbors were gathering, forming a small crowd at a respectful distance. Even the concierge peered over the desk, wide-eyed. Karen blustered, "This is outrageous. I'll contact our building's legal counsel." I I've done everything by the book. But she made no move to produce any documents, because she clearly had none. After a few more tense minutes, the inspectors handed Karen a written notice stating she must shut down immediately and arrange a follow-up appointment if she wished to operate legally. They also warned her of potential fines for noncompliance. Carrie, standing off to the side, gave me a quick, discreet smile before following the inspectors out of the building. The hush that settled over the lobby was electric with shock. As soon as the inspectors left, Karen's face twisted with rage. She tore down her price list and stuffed it into the trash. Several residents watched in near silence, some stifling, satisfied smiles. Karen then marched to the security desk, demanding to see the sign-in logs to find out who'd tipped off the city. The concierge shrugged helplessly. "I'm sorry, Ms. Bennington, but I can't reveal that information." And, well, they had official badges. I had to let them in. She fumed, pointing at the gathering neighbors. "One of you has orchestrated this sabotage. You're interfering with a simple building amenity." Her voice echoed sharply through the marble-floored lobby. Martha stepped forward, arms crossed. "Margaret, you were charging us $5 or $6 for lemonade in our own lobby, with no explanation of where the money went. Call that an amenity if you like, but we prefer to spend our money elsewhere." Karen whipped around, eyes blazing. "You have no authority to question how I manage building affairs. I'm the HOA president. You're not above city ordinances." Martha snapped, uncharacteristically bold. "If you need a permit, you need a permit. That's how the real world works." Karen looked like she might explode, but she realized half the lobby was listening. She grabbed her cooler, cups, and the bright yellow tablecloth, stuffing them into a large plastic bin. Neighbors parted like the Red Sea as she dragged everything into the back office. Within minutes, the entire setup was gone. Only a sticky patch of floor and a faint lemony odor remained. A wave of relief washed over me. The dreaded Margaret's Lemonade stand had been defeated. In the days that followed, the building felt different, freer, somehow. People chatted in the lobby, without Karen's looming sales pitch. The wide marble floors looked emptier, but also more like what a condo lobby should be. A neutral space, not a personal storefront. Word spread quickly. Ms. Bennington had been forced to shut down her unlicensed lemonade stand under threat of city fines. The news even reached a few local blogs that occasionally covered HOA drama, though the coverage was small-scale. Still, the entire fiasco was a hot topic among residents. Karen, meanwhile, avoided the lobby during peak hours, often entering and exiting through the garage. When we did see her, she wore a tight-lipped expression, refusing to acknowledge jokes or direct references to her stand. Rumor had it she was furious at whoever snitched, but she had no proof. And if she suspected me or Carrie, she couldn't do much. Openly retaliating would raise even more suspicion from the board and from neighbors who already eyed her warily. At the next board meeting, Ms. Green officially added an agenda item about lobby vendor permissions. In a polite but firm tone, she proposed that any future stands or sale operations must be formally approved by the board, with documented permits if required by city laws. The motion passed unanimously, leaving Karen no choice but to agree. Though Karen had lost the lemonade battle, she wasn't one to surrender quietly. Subtle signs of her dissatisfaction emerged. For instance, minor complaints from Karen started flooding in about small infractions. A doormat that didn't match the color code, a neighbor's dog barking once at noon, a decorative wreath that looked too large. She seemed to be lashing out, using her HOA authority to nitpick people into compliance. A group of us, Martha, Greg, Ms. Green, and a couple of other residents, gathered in my unit one evening for an informal discussion. Martha sighed. She's punishing the building. If she can't get her way, she'll make life miserable in other areas. Ms. Green nodded. But we have procedures. If her complaints aren't valid, they won't hold up. We just have to stay vigilant. She's used to ruling with an iron fist for too long. I offered everyone a glass of iced tea, much cheaper than any of Karen's lemonades, and said, "Do you think the rest of the board might consider removing her as president? Is there a recall process?" Greg shrugged. We need a majority of owners to sign a petition and schedule a special election. That's possible, but it's a lot of work. Some folks still think she's beneficial because she keeps the building in order. We all exchange glances, realizing that while we'd won one battle, the war over Karen's reign wasn't necessarily over. But for now, we had at least halted her personal money-making scheme in the lobby, and that felt like a meaningful victory. Interestingly, a few weeks after the stand shut down, Karen sent out a mass email with the subject line Community Fundraising Idea. In it, she proposed turning the Margaret's Lemonade concept into a monthly building bake sale, the proceeds of which would supposedly go to the HOA's improvement fund. This time, she promised it would be properly licensed, with any required permits or disclaimers. The email read, "Dear residents, I regret the confusion caused by my earlier attempt to provide refreshments in our lobby. I see now that the building would benefit from a more official approach. In the spirit of community fundraising, I am exploring the idea of a monthly bake sale, including lemonade or coffee, where all proceeds go directly to the HOA improvement projects. Wouldn't you love to see updated furniture in our lounge or better equipment in our fitness room? Let's come together and make it happen lawfully. I will open a discussion at the next board meeting. Please bring any ideas you might have." Margaret Bennington, HOA President. Metropolitan Towers. Some neighbors reacted with suspicion. Was this an attempt at damage control? Others felt it was a step in the right direction, an olive branch. Even I was willing to give her a chance if it meant we could find a legitimate way to raise funds for the building. Regardless, the forced, overpriced Margaret's Lemonade was unlikely to return. The new plan involved a communal approach, official board oversight, and city compliance. Perhaps Karen had learned a lesson, or maybe she was just trying to salvage her reputation. At the next HOA board meeting, Karen presented her community bake sale proposal. She wore a practiced smile, the corners of her eyes crinkling in a semblance of humility. She laid out a vision. Once a month, residents could donate baked goods, fresh lemonade, or other treats, and the sale would be held in the lounge, not the lobby. Proceeds would go into a transparent improvements account. Ms. Green and Mr. Diaz asked pointed questions. Will we see receipts for all sales so we know exactly how much is collected? What specific improvements will the funds finance, and do we get a say in that? Have you investigated the city permit requirements for a monthly sale? Karen nodded vigorously, claiming she was willing to do whatever it takes. She even mentioned that she'd started reading city guidelines. A hush fell as she asked for a board vote of confidence to explore the plan. In the end, the board granted a cautious green light, provided everything was done transparently and with valid permits. Karen's expression remained calm, but I sensed a measure of relief, like she was grateful for a second chance to redeem her idea, albeit with oversight. Interestingly, the proposed bake sale sparked renewed energy among residents. Some welcomed it as a way to unify the community after months of tension. People started offering to volunteer. A sign-up sheet appeared in the mailroom for those willing to bake cookies, brownies, pies, or brew coffee. Even better, folks recommended setting prices that were fair, $1 or $2, not the inflated sums Karen had demanded before. A neighbor named Lydia, an amateur pastry chef, got excited and planned to make gourmet cupcakes. Another, Terrence, offered to supply home-brewed iced tea. We saw real cooperation, and the negative aura that had hung over the building began to dissipate. However, Karen's role in it all was still questionable. Would she truly follow the rules this time? Or would she try to manipulate the process for personal gain again? Most of us approached it with cautious optimism. At least she was going through official channels now. Behind the scenes, though, Karen seemed different, subdued even. In passing, I overheard her on the phone, presumably with a city official, sounding frustrated about permit applications. I heard phrases like, "But it's just a small event, and why do we need so many forms?" in her clipped tone. Clearly, she was grappling with the reality that city ordinances aren't easily bypassed. One evening, as I walked my dog around the block, I spotted Karen sitting alone on a bench outside the building. Her posture was slumped, her expression drawn. She didn't notice me, and I debated whether to say hello. In the end, I quietly passed by, giving her space. A part of me felt a flicker of empathy. She was so used to being in control, and now she had to adapt. Still, I couldn't forget that she tried to run an unlicensed lemonade stand right under our noses and gotten scolded by the city. Some form of contrition on her part was long overdue. Maybe this bake sale idea was her attempt to mend fences, or maybe it was just a facade. Only time would tell. The first official Metropolitan Towers bake sale was set for a Saturday morning in the communal lounge. Karen dutifully filed the necessary paperwork to the city for a one-day event, listing it as a private fundraiser for the building's HOA. I heard from Ms. Green that the city official overseeing the event was satisfied with the approach, so there'd be no risk of another shutdown scenario. Residents rallied with enthusiasm. Posters were printed. A handful of volunteers arranged tables and chairs the night before. The lounge looked festive, adorned with pastel tablecloths, balloon bouquets, and even a small chalkboard sign listing the day's offerings. Items range from chocolate chip cookies at $1 each to fancy lemon tarts at $3, plus coffee and lemonade at $1 to $2 per cup. The difference from Karen's old pricing was stark. That Friday night, the building buzzed with conversation. People exclaimed how nice it was to do something wholesome and communal. Even Greg, who'd once been cynical about everything Karen-related, admitted, at least it's not a rip-off this time. Saturday morning arrived, and the lounge quickly filled with residents. The air smelled of cinnamon, sugar, and fresh citrus. Karen was there, flitting from table to table in a less abrasive manner, greeting guests, and making sure everything ran smoothly. Ms. Green handled the cash box, ensuring transparency. There would be an official count of funds at the end of the day. People lined up to buy pastries, brownies, or a cup of lemonade, legitimately priced. Lydia's gourmet cupcakes were a hit, selling out within an hour. Terrence's home-brewed iced tea was praised for its subtle sweetness. The overall atmosphere was one of neighborly camaraderie. I paid $2 for a large glass of lemonade that actually tasted great, better than Karen's earlier concoction, ironically. I asked Ms. Green how the proceeds would be used, and she explained the plan to put them toward new lounge furniture and to boost the holiday decorations budget. She even teased a possible small donation to a local charity if they raised enough. Karen hovered nearby, wearing a forced yet polite smile, occasionally stepping in to reorganize items or greet new arrivals. She wasn't the star of the show anymore. This was truly a group effort. It felt like a healthier dynamic than the top-down approach she'd tried to impose before. For once, the entire building worked together, and the results showed in the genuine laughter and community spirit. By mid-afternoon, the sale wound down. A few leftover cookies and brownies were given away. Ms. Green and Mr. Diaz, joined by 2 volunteers, counted the money in plain sight. They tallied up nearly $600 in sales, a tidy sum for a half-day event. Karen, her arms folded, watched from a slight distance, as if uncertain how to insert herself. She looked oddly vulnerable, no longer the unquestioned authority. Finally, Ms. Green invited her over to verify the totals. Karen nodded, wearing a subdued expression. As you can see, Ms. Green said cheerfully, "We did pretty well. All in compliance with city permits, all done fairly. I'll deposit this into the HOA improvements account first thing Monday." Karen cleared her throat. "Yes, that's wonderful. I'm glad we could come together as a community. Thank you all for participating." Her words might have rung hollow weeks ago, but now they carried a hint of sincerity. Perhaps the fiasco with the city inspectors had humbled her. Or maybe she realized that real community spirit can't be forced or exploited for personal gain. Whatever the reason, the event ended on a surprisingly positive note. People left smiling, energized by the success. In the weeks that followed the bake sale, a noticeable shift in Karen's behavior emerged. She became less heavy-handed with minor infractions. Reports of petty fines and random citations dropped sharply. The front desk staff even mentioned that Karen seemed more polite in her interactions, though she still carried a certain aloofness. Ms. Green and Mr. Diaz took advantage of this calmer atmosphere to propose other communal events: a monthly movie night in the lounge, a potluck dinner, perhaps even a charity clothing drive in the lobby. Karen, while not overtly enthusiastic, didn't oppose these ideas. She seemed to realize that the building thrived when residents felt engaged, not coerced or overcharged. Martha confided in me. I never thought I'd see the day. She's still a bit of a pain, but at least she's not pushing us around every second. I nodded. It's like the city crackdown taught her a lesson. She can't just do whatever she wants. And though not everyone had forgotten or forgiven the overpriced lemonade fiasco, many were willing to give Karen a chance, so long as she acted in the building's best interest. As for me, I felt relieved that the atmosphere was finally approaching what I'd hoped for when I moved in. A civilized, supportive environment, free from manipulative stand owners. One evening, as I stood by the mailboxes, Karen approached cautiously. "Sam," she said, using my first name for the first time since I'd moved in. A word. I faced her, heart thumping a bit. "Sure." She inhaled, crossing her arms uncomfortably. "I realize we've had friction. I want you to know that I truly believed in providing a convenience with that lemonade stand. I didn't think I needed a permit. I thought, as HOA president, I could handle it in-house." Clearly, I was mistaken. I studied her face, noting the tension in her jaw. "Well, we all learned from it. That's something." Karen nodded. "I hope there are no hard feelings. I see now that we accomplish more when we work together." The bake sale was a testament to that. The city inspection, though embarrassing, pushed me to do things the right way. I offered a small smile. "It takes a lot to admit you were wrong. I appreciate you saying that." She gave a hesitant nod, then turned and walked away. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was something. Perhaps, for Karen, it represented a huge step in acknowledging she wasn't above the law or the community. Just when things seemed to be calming down, a letter arrived in Karen's HOA office from the city's Licensing and Consumer Protection Division. She'd been assessed a fine for the period during which she operated the lemonade stand unlicensed. The sum wasn't astronomical, around $1,200, according to rumors, but it was certainly no small slap on the wrist, either. The building rumor mill went into overdrive. Some questioned whether Karen would pay from her personal funds or try to shift it onto the HOA. Ms. Green swiftly reassured everyone at the next board meeting that the HOA was not responsible for personal fines related to unlicensed activity. Karen, she said, would have to settle that debt privately. At the meeting, Karen confirmed it was her responsibility to pay. She looked stressed but also resigned, probably understanding that if she tried to pass the cost onto the HOA, the city might investigate further and the board would revolt. So she swallowed the cost. The neighbors found it only fair. After all, it was her unauthorized stand. After paying the fine, Karen seemed genuinely rattled, though she kept a stoic front in public. A few neighbors spotted her quietly discussing finances with a friend in the lounge. There were whispers that she'd incurred some personal debts and hoped her lemonade project would supplement her income more discreetly. If true, it explained a lot, though it hardly excused the way she went about it. Still, knowing there might be personal struggles behind her imperious behavior cast her in a slightly more sympathetic light. Even I couldn't help feeling a twinge of pity. Life in the city was expensive, and maybe she was desperate. But as Ms. Green pointed out, plenty of people face money problems. They don't solve it by forcing overpriced lemonade down their neighbors' throats. With Karen's credibility shaken, talk of the upcoming HOA election increased. Her term as president was set to expire in about 6 months. Some residents speculated she wouldn't run again. Others suspected she'd cling to power if she thought she could survive the scandal. Ms. Green, widely admired for her fairness, emerged as a potential challenger. So did Mr. Diaz, though he seemed more comfortable in a supportive role. Some neighbors urged a more radical approach. Recall her now. But the board opted to let the normal cycle play out, to avoid stirring chaos and legal fees. Meanwhile, the building functioned better than it had in years. Karen, ironically, was no longer micromanaging everyone's daily lives. She mostly stuck to routine duties, ensuring monthly fees were collected, scheduling minor repairs, and so forth. Freed from her overbearing presence, folks started to see each other more as neighbors than as potential rule breakers. The success of the first bake sale inspired a second one, held about 2 months later. This time, we raised an even greater amount, nearly $800, thanks to expanded offerings. Karen showed up, contributed a tray of sugar cookies, and politely helped run the sign-in table. She didn't hog the spotlight or inflate prices. The entire atmosphere brimmed with a genuine sense of community. People exchanged recipes and complimented each other's treats. Ms. Green announced that part of the funds would go toward new lounge chairs, with a portion also donated to a local food bank. As residents discussed ways to keep improving the building, Karen nodded in agreement, making no attempt to dominate the conversation. After the event, a group of us lingered in the lounge, sipping leftover coffee. Greg raised a cup in a mock toast. "To city permits," he said wryly, prompting chuckles. "And to neighbors who respect the rules." Even Karen laughed quietly, a sign, perhaps, that she was finally letting her guard down. Time rolled on in Metropolitan Towers, bringing small but meaningful changes. The meltdown over Karen's unauthorized lemonade stand became something of a legend, retold in half-joking anecdotes among residents whenever new folks moved in. Yet it also marked a turning point, a moment where the community demanded accountability and got it. Karen never again tried to unilaterally impose a personal project on the building. Although she remained HOA president until the next election, her leadership style mellowed. She eventually decided not to run for another term, allowing Ms. Green to take the helm. Under new leadership, the building embraced open communication, fairness, and legitimate fundraising events. No more hidden profiteering. Looking back, the day those city inspectors strode into our lobby felt momentous. It showed that no one, not even a power-hungry HOA president, is above the law. And it highlighted the strength in neighbors uniting, quietly or openly, to do what's right. Despite her flaws, Karen learned her lesson, paying the fine, acknowledging her missteps, and pivoting toward more collaborative endeavors. That growth was as much a win for her as it was for the rest of us. Indeed, there was something hopeful in seeing a once dominant figure adapt, albeit grudgingly, to the will of the community. For me, life at Metropolitan Towers settled into the pleasant routine I'd originally envisioned. Friendly neighbors, well-maintained halls, and a lobby free from pushy lemonade sales. Whenever I'd pass by the spot where Karen's stand once stood, I'd grin, recalling how we invited a friend from City Hall to knock her scheme off its pedestal. In the end, the fiasco led to a newfound spirit of cooperation, better board oversight, and a small but meaningful shift in Karen's perspective. That, I'd say, was a happy ending for everyone, proving that even the most overbearing Karen can be humbled when a community stands firm and enforces the rules meant for all.